Hello everybody, welcome to this amazing video of Dead by Daylight. Had to be sure I put amazing in there because people get antsy when I forget. My apologies, it's there. Anywho, today the unthinkable happened. BHVR announced a change to rework Decisive Strike. Wait a minute, that actually sounds pretty thinkable. Didn't we think this like 9 months ago? Did we not already cover this? Well, looking at the post at Dead by Daylight's forums, link in the description if you want to read it, they've announced the upcoming change for the next update, and I'll be covering that post in this video and what this means for current users of Decisive Strike and the killers of Dead by Daylight. For the upcoming PTB, we'll actually be able to test this new change. The change to Decisive Strike is that the perk will start inactive. Once you are unhooked or unhook yourself, then Decisive Strike will activate for 60 seconds. During this time, if the survivor is downed and picked up, then a skill check will set off, just like normal Decisive Strike. Successfully landing the skill check will stun the killer and release the survivor. Regardless if you fail or succeed the skill check, the perk will then be disabled for the rest of the game. A successful Decisive Strike will actually make you the obsession. If somebody else was the obsession, it will remove it from them and instead apply it to you. So what does this mean? This means that Decisive Strike is no longer a second chance perk. Instead, it is now a counter perk to being focused. They've also increased the size of the skill check, so it makes it easier for those who are struggling to land it, as it already now has a strict requirement to even start. And it also introduces a new mechanic of altering the obsession in the match. Ultimately, this changes up the game quite a bit for killers in terms of their obsession perks. As an example, perks like Dying Light are likely to have new styles of gameplay since they can be countered. If you were to kill your obsession, then get Decisive Struck, a new obsession is then assigned, which removes Dying Light until the new obsession is killed. Things like this alter the game quite a bit and may indirectly nerf and buff some perks. Decisive Strike will now also be a hidden perk since survivors will not establish the obsession with the perk. If the killer or survivors don't run a different obsession perk, then an obsession won't exist until the first Decisive Strike is hit. A killer will then have to make a choice to pick up a survivor that they recently downed when they were saved from the hook, if they choose to focus them down. Overall, the change is a nerf, and a massive one. Is it deserved? Yes. We'll get into that in a bit, but let's explain why it's one hell of a nerf. First, Decisive Strike serves as one of those many second chance perks that can grant a survivor all the time they need to run the killer for an extra generator or two, or if the survivor is unlucky, they may just go down instantly again. But the point is, it grants a near guarantee to just add extra time to your chase. For Dead by Daylight, there is typically one meta value to survivors who seek to win, and that's extending the chase time. Anything that can grant a survivor more time in chase is instantly viable, as the survivor's purpose is not exactly to avoid getting caught, but to extend the chase for as long as possible before getting caught. It is not common that a survivor actually ends up living through a chase, though it is possible, it just isn't seen often with killers using their best perks or add-ons. Therefore, perks like Decisive Strike have high value, as it nearly guarantees that extended chase if you were to fail in routing the killer long enough. This is why self-care, exhaustion perks, and additional healing speed is valuable. Being able to assure you have that second health state for chase helps you extend that chase when you take a hit. The same thing goes for your allies. If you can heal your allies quickly, they can serve as a longer chase while you work on generators. So what do I think about this nerf? Honestly, not too much. It's a perk that hardly affects me as a survivor. I definitely don't ever really run it. I may have done it for some footage in a video or upon request, but typically my standard build does not fit Decisive Strike. I know that a couple people will be upset in terms of relying on its strength to push back against killers or to bully killers with its ability to grant them that free escape. I just don't feel that it'll affect me nearly as much. Though players may show frustration on this change as well, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of pushback. I also know that as time passes, survivors will adapt to the change with the various other perks that they have that are still extremely strong in today's meta. As a killer, however, this is a great step forward, as this is a change we've been wanting to see for years. We wanted to see Decisive Strike just removed, and this essentially removes it from the game. It does allow for a similar effect, but I believe it is very fair to have something anti-tunneling, and it does have quite a bit of counterplay in it. but we could actually make a whole Tide Talk on Decisive Strike to discuss the impact the perk has made, as it was hell of a game changer, and it became a center of problems for the game in terms of balance. It seems the developers are taking the right steps to balance the game, but there are still some concerns I wish to address before we wrap up this video. First, the speculation of a Decisive Strike nerf came out 9 months ago and was dropped. Though this forum post says it will be in the update next patch, I truly hope they keep their word on this and it goes through. We've had too many balance changes that were proper, things that were desperately needed and still are today, such as the hatch standoff, the end game, generator times, Decisive Strike. And it's fantastic that this is coming in, and I hope they stay on the right path this time. Normally we're on a roller coaster, and this concerns me because we get a good patch that balances it, puts killers finally in a power roll, and then 2 patches down the line we've taken 2 steps back. It's been a constant theme with Dead by Daylight for years, but it is in a better place, and this patch will continue to move it in the right direction. Second, I think the nerf might actually be too much. There's a bit too many restrictions on this perk, and the fact it grants Obsession is also quite possibly in the favor of Killer again, and let me explain. First, you only have 60 seconds to be downed and picked up. Even if I were to tunnel you and down you, I could still go do other things, come back and pick you up. It takes 16 seconds for you to get healed. If I'm running Sloppy Butcher, it'll be a little longer than that, and of course you can recover there, but I'm likely going to run something to counter this if it is still meta somewhere down the line. Truthfully, I think if I hit you within 60 seconds of you being saved off a hook, I think Decisive Strike should just remain active at all times. If you really want it to be an anti-tunneling perk, then make me feel punished for tunneling. And the reason I say this is because now I have to look at what can I do to use this obsession in my favor as a killer. How can I tunnel with purpose? And I can do this by running things like save the best for last. Let's say, for example, my obsession quit, or I killed them off too fast and I'm running save the best for last and I don't have any tokens. Well, now I'm going to start focusing people down to reinstate my perk. By doing this, I risk the chance of someone becoming the obsession and getting a little extra chase time, but I get my really powerful perk back. But if you're not running Decisive Strike and I don't get my perk back, then I just get to tunnel you, focus you, and you die quickly because I'm allowing you to be saved and I'm making sure you go down. Regardless, Decisive Strike now in the meta is going to either make me tunnel you to reinstate something I've lost, or I'm just not going to care, and if you have it, you have it. In this type of way, I would hope that Decisive Strike is powerful enough to serve its purpose, and that purpose, apparently based on what they're trying to make it, is an anti-tunnel perk. And I think that sounds fantastic. I think that really should be in the game, but I think that Decisive Strike, the way it is labeled now, is too weak to properly serve as anti-tunneling. Just as another example, we have Remember Me. Let's say I focused the obsession too hard and I killed them off and they didn't run Decisive Strike. Well, now I want to reinstate it because I probably didn't get all 6 stacks on it, and by getting Decisive Struck, I'm now incentivized by allowing this to happen. Now I can get a couple more stacks, still focus someone down, remove them from the game, and if we were to get to the end game and they need to open those doors, it isn't going to happen. Now, this is all theory on paper, and it might not be as practical as I think, and I might be overthinking it, but that's what I do, and honestly, I hope it isn't. I hope it doesn't work that way. I would love to test this change myself and be sure that the perks work to incentivize players not to tunnel. I honestly think the proper fix might just be to remove the whole obsession side of Decisive Strike. Just let it function as the anti-tunnel perk. That sounds great the way they have it, but it has so many heavy restrictions already, such as being required to be downed within 60 seconds and picked up. I'm not sure why we need to swap obsessions, because that could work against them as well as for them in some cases. This really comes back to the borrowed time change that happened a while back, where borrowed time no longer affected both players. Instead, now it only affects the one that gets saved, in the sense that borrowed time was so strong, it was alongside one of the very many second chance perks that was just way too powerful and unstoppable for killers. Now it got changed to where it swiftly left the meta. It's not ran nearly as often. It's still usable, and that's where Decisive Strike's gonna land. It's still usable, it's just not gonna be used very much anymore, if at all. And that's it for the video. Thank you guys for watching. We'll be returning tomorrow with more Tide Talk, as we got a lot of perks to go through and a lot of history to cover. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and as always, good game.